I'm joined by Greg Cameron of College Hockey News, who's been covering Arizona State. Greg, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you were at the two games. Obviously, we don't have the luxury to fly cross country and be there. What, what was your main takeaway from Quinnipiac's performance in person when you look at Friday and Saturday?
Well, one of the things that Coach Pecknell brought up before the game was the youth of the team, 22 freshmen and sophomores, and it showed as the game went on Friday, and it definitely showed coming out of the room for the whole 60 minutes on Saturday. They're very talented players. Liked what I saw from guys like Skylar Brindamore, guys like Gus Van Ness, but it's still a work in progress. It's early in the season. They're going to make mistakes, and a lot of that had to do with how the goals went in. A lot of blown coverages in the defensive zone in front of the net and on the weak side. Just something that they can shore up as they go forward here and conference play starts soon.
It's interesting you bring that up because last year when you talked about Quinnipiac, you would say that their strong point was their decor with Prisky, Rafferty, Carlos Kuksta, and players like that. Obviously, they've all kind of left for the AHL, NHL, as it may be, but now it's kind of the offense that needs to pick it up. And you talked about the decor. Would you say that's the biggest weakness of Quinnipiac's team right now?
I would say so as of right now, yeah. And like we mentioned with the upperclassmen, it's only Kuksta left.
Yeah.
That's an upperclassman. He got the start both nights. He was one of the more relied upon guys throughout the weekend. I expected a lot more from Peter Delibertori. Was a little bit disappointed in his performance. Obviously, he provides a boost on the power play, which is one aspect they'll need to clean up here as the season goes on. But the pairings were mixed up a lot. Coach Pecknell didn't put a lot of stake into keeping guys together too much, and he tried to get a lot of different looks out of the guys on defense, and it just wouldn't work when all was said and done. They were still getting out hustled by Arizona State. It's something that it's hard to play in that arena, right? Given how on top of you all those people are, given how small it feels, but it's something that they're going to need to improve going forward. I think that they'll be fine. To be honest, as time goes on here, as they get their feet wet more, but it's certainly the point that they'll need to improve upon the most.
Yeah, those are all things that we discussed. One that I didn't even think about is the atmosphere. When you think about the People's United Center here in Hampton, it has the makings of almost an AHL, ECHL type of rink where there's a lot of nice seating and stands around.
Very much so. Yeah, I've been there actually.
Oh,
I was there. I was there a few years ago. It was an ECAC game. I can't remember exactly who they played. I had a couple friends that went to school there. Went up and saw a game, and it was a great facility. But the roof is about 3 times higher than it is at Arizona State's rink, and sometimes if you feel the compression, you kind of feel it when you get out there on the ice, and maybe that was one of the things that happened.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the atmosphere of the People's United Center, but when you think a few years ago I went up to Cornell for the ECAC hockey playoffs and just Lina and just like the atmosphere and how close everything was and the wood bleachers, you get like that real passionate fan base type of feeling. And so that's definitely different. And Arizona State's rink is obviously different. One thing that you did bring up that I agree with is Deliberatory. And he's a player that seems to have all of the talent in the world. There's a reason Vegas took him in the 6th round. But at times he seems a little immature, trying to do too much. So it's all about honing that in.
Correct. I watched a lot of him in particular this weekend. I was looking at the kids that were drafted, just trying to see what they were like. And he liked to jump up on plays, but he'd also get caught going back. You got to balance the two. You got to know your gaps. You got to know which pucks to play along the end board and which ones not to. So it's something that he's going to have to work on. But the way he conducted the power play units looked good. There's a foundation there. They only scored 1 goal on 11 tries on the power play. That was brutal. That's not going to help you. But
no, that's what they're struggling with right now.
They definitely have a guy that can replace Chase Prisky in that regard in Peter Delibertori.
I would agree with that. And now shifting gears towards the Arizona State perspective, we know about Arizona State last year as Quinnipiac students and Quinnipiac beat reporters. How would you compare their roster this year to last year's team when you think about, obviously, Joey DeCord's no longer there, Justin Robbins, who I believe was a Quinnipiac commit and then jump ship to Arizona State and is the backup this year. But besides that,
was, yes.
Yeah, which is also interesting. And Arizona State's built a great foundation for recruits who wouldn't want to go in the sun and play for a borderline top 10 hockey team right now.
They certainly have no disadvantages outside of the rink when it comes to recruiting. I think the biggest difference is the depth. We saw a lot of the forward depth showcase this weekend with the changes up front in the top six. Dimitrios Komanzis, Calgary Flames draft pick. He's a sophomore. He played at the wing. He played at center. He's a guy that Coach Powers said is likely going to be a center down the line as he goes toward his professional career. But when they moved him down to the second line center with Logan Genuine on his left, Austin Lemieux on his right, he really sparked that line. Genuine, NAHL goal scoring record holder now with 60 last year, and he's finally starting to find his groove here. He's played with Lemieux all year. That looks like a very good pairing there between the two, and putting him in the middle really adds to that center depth. They were missing Brett Gruber over the weekend, probably their best overall center, and it really didn't show outside of the faceoffs. Quinnipiac did win the faceoffs, but Quinnipiac was outpossessed pretty heavily by Arizona State throughout the weekend.
Yeah, that kind of seems a theme that goes into the Quinnipiac youth and experience. When they're playing a team with just as much, arguably more, arguably less, the same amount of talent with them, it's how can they really get puck possession and start moving the puck up the ice. Going back to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was one thing that I noticed they started to struggle with as the game went on, as they got more tired, as things weren't working in their favor. Arizona State kept the pedal down, and we saw times when ASU had possession in the Quinnipiac zone for minutes at a time. It was something that I figured that there would be a little bit less to this Quinnipiac team than what I watched last year or even last week against Vermont in the 4-0 win. 4-0 win.
Yeah.
But it was still a little bit astonishing to see.
Yeah, and it seems like Rand Pecknell preaches all the time about the team's identity, which is pace of play, toughness, basically a lot of general hockey terms that Quinnipiac encapsulates, and they seem to do a really good job of doing that. But right now it's all about getting that youth and experience to buy into those values. And with Arizona State, when I talked to Nick Germain before the season, he circled Arizona State. He said Arizona State and UMass are two of the out-of-conference games that he's looking forward to most. And how could you not when it's Arizona State, a rematch of the NCAA tournament, and UMass, obviously, who made it all the way to the national championship game. But from an Arizona State perspective, did you get the sense there was a chip on their shoulder from how last year ended with the best year in program history?
Absolutely. They talked about that at length throughout the week. We got to hear from Brinson Pashnuk, the captain, and he minced no words, saying that was scheduled, that was circled on the schedule for them as well. It was something that I wanted to see them come out and have that fire. They typically start games a little bit slower than they have this past weekend. And they certainly reversed that trend, given the team that they were playing across from.
Yeah, I remember last year in the press conference, Brinson and both Greg Powers were really emotional with how far the program has come. And now when you look at it, it's kind of full circle how they beat Quinnipiac to get their first sweep ever of a top 10 team, I believe, in the USCHO.com poll.
Yes, that's correct. It seems like there's a new milestone that they check off every time something like this happens, and the spirit in practice this week was really good because of that. With Arizona State's scheduling, they have the chances. They have these certain chances in the schedule, right, to kind of punch a hole in their tournament resume card, so to speak. Then the next one they get will be Denver in a month, right. And you gotta make a statement in those games, and you gotta have control of the rest of your schedule and the rest of them. And they certainly were able to put a couple punches in the card for their resume right now.
Yeah, and in terms of pairwise, it's huge to beat Quinnipiac twice, albeit the location. It'll be interesting though if these two teams have to play each other later in the year or next year. But just like a general question, Arizona State is really just a team that, like, as a college hockey fan and just someone who loves the game, it's hard to not root for a team that's built from the ground up. And Arizona State obviously is not known as a hockey city or a hockey mecca. How is the campus, the city, the people embracing this team? Does it seem like there's more of an interest in hockey? Obviously, you have all the drama with the Coyotes and of that nature. How are people likening to Arizona State hockey?
They're really coming around to it. I pity the Phoenix sports fans. I really do. It's a tough life for them. Like you said, with the Coyotes, it's been tough with all the ownership changes, the arena situation, and we see Arizona State. They're selling out that building, albeit 800, 900 seats. They're selling it out. They're getting a good atmosphere. They're getting people talking about them. Players were going recognized, weren't going unrecognized, rather, on campus last year when they made that run, and a bit of the same this year as well. I want to give a shout out to Arizona State's student section. They don't have the chance. They don't have the things that you see in a lot of college hockey buildings, but they're rallying around the team too. They're kind of building up their own traditions, and when they get a new building, I'm sure they'll be even more of a factor there. It's been great to see. My first beat as a student, actually, when I went to Arizona State, was the club team when they were still cool. A club Division I team in 2014, and it's come a very long way since then. Large part due in large part to the people they've kept around the program, but also due to the support that they've gotten from the school, from the fans, and from the community in general.
Yeah, it's definitely a different perspective as you had as a student there than I do, for example, because Quinnipiac's in the Northeast. Any Hockey East team is about an hour or 2 hours away that you can just go to those games and immerse yourself in the college hockey culture. But it is really cool to see that Arizona State's building up a following, especially with how much talent they have and will continue to have on their roster.
That's right. And one thing that's worth noting is Coach Pecknold's ability to go to these schools and get them on the schedule as much as he does, whether it was RIT, whether it was Mercyhurst, some of the programs that are relatively newer. Penn State, obviously, I'm sure they want more home games than they can give Quinnipiac. That's probably why they haven't played to date yet. Maybe that changes down the road, but he also has a good relationship with Coach Powers at Arizona State, and has a soft spot for growing the game, kind of like the coaches did when he came into NCAA hockey all those years ago. Now, what was it, in the early '90s, right? And he's been there. He's been the fixture there for a while. He's paying it forward, and he's a proponent of growing the game.
Yeah, and I remember last year I was at, I believe, it was the Nassau Coliseum. Quinnipiac beat Colgate. It was 5 or 6-0, but it was Rand Pecknold's 1,000th win, and he was in a very reflective mood, talking about how when he took the Quinnipiac job, and it started out where he didn't even have enough ice space and had to do super early morning practices with his non-Division I team. So definitely can see that he has a soft spot for growing the game and wanting to get it up to where it is. So I'm sure when he's not playing Arizona State, he's definitely thinking about just the trajectory that they've been on, because it can only be good things, and almost mirrors Quinnipiac's rise to not the top, because they obviously haven't won a national title yet, but just rise up the college hockey ranks.
That's exactly right, and the coaches always like to talk about the amount of talents in junior hockey nowadays, that there's just not enough scholarships to go around for all these talented players, and we may see that change in the years coming, given some of the things that have happened at schools like Quinnipiac, at schools like Arizona State, schools like Penn State, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's good to see like schools like Quinnipiac and Arizona State, like they now have almost like the resume to go in for these big guys and these guys who are deserving of these huge scholarships, and they're able to get some of them, not all of them yet. That's obviously a process, and it determines the fit of the student, but it all depends. Greg, is there anything else that you would like to add about Quinnipiac, Arizona State, something you want to bring up and discuss?
The goaltending actually would be a good point to discuss real quickly here. We've been talking about Yes, we've been talking about before coming into this what we're expecting from Keith Petruzzelli and what we've seen. He still kind of needs to prove himself. That shutout versus Vermont, a couple of goals. Quinnipiac got a couple of good bounces. Vermont turned it up at the end, and it ended up being a little bit closer than the score might have given you the impression. Coming into Arizona State's, I got to watch him in practice. He looked sharp. We got to see Evan Fear in the game as well before the dam broke there in the third period on Friday. He looked good too. It's just that they're not stopping the pucks that they need to stop. And then coming back to one of my first points, they're not getting the help that they need on the weak side or in front of the net. If you want your goaltender to see pucks and stop pucks, you gotta protect those areas, and they didn't do that too well in front of him. He's gonna probably grow from this going forward. And on the opposite side too, Arizona State's Evan DeBrouwer. He's a sophomore now. He had to sit on the bench the entire year last year behind Joey Decord.
Yeah.
I was pretty skeptical of him going in as well. I thought Max Project, the transfer from BU, would be the one to win the job ultimately. And I didn't think that Evan showed some of the things that he needed to going into the season. And I will be the first to admit that I was wrong there. He's certainly grown into this the starting job now. Good showing out at Air Force really boosted his confidence for last weekend against Quinnipiac, and even though he never played during the season, he was just as heartbroken as everyone else was losing to Quinnipiac in the tournament, and he channeled that as well. He's finally making those Decord-esque saves, right? Powers always talks about some of the things that Decord was able to do well in moving laterally and making that second effort, third effort save really fast, like getting in position, getting that puck. And DeBrouwer doesn't have that as much, but he's improving on it. He saw a lot of it this weekend. And I think both goalies now have the chance to improve from the weekend going forward.
Yeah, and something both of these goalies don't have is Decord's puck moving ability and ability to play the puck out, especially from behind the net. One thing I want to touch on with Keith Petruzzelli is, you and I talked about this a little bit, such a high draft pick by the Detroit Red Wings, and he's in his junior year, and freshman year he's teetering and tottering with Andrew Shortridge, and then last year Andrew Shortridge has a 940, so you can't really expect Petruzzelli to get in the team, and obviously he's still developing, but do you think that Quinnipiac fans in general expect too much out of him with being a third-round pick? They expect him to steal games for this team when their defense isn't having a great game and their D-core is not filling the right gaps. Is it wrong to expect Petruzzelli to be in that situation, or is he just not there yet and you think he has the ability to be?
I think he has the ability to be, but I do think there's a little bit of that as well, the expectation there. He has played a good amount of games in the past. I believe he's split a couple of seasons, and this year he looks to be the number one guy as of right now. But like we said, if he's not getting help, he's not going to make the saves. And it's great being 6'5". You get to cover more than that. But one of the things that I noticed with him, when he gets down, he takes a while to get to that second save. And obviously that's one of the challenges of being a bigger goalie. Maybe that's something that Detroit can help him work on as they go forward. But if he doesn't have a good year this year and potentially comes back next year, he's got to prove himself even further now, because Detroit might not want him back. Detroit has the option at that point to say, hey, go test the market. Thank you for everything you've done. And then he's going to have to really prove himself even further. I think the expectation there might be a little bit too much to start in anyways, but like we've said, still early. Conference play still getting underway. They're a team that's going to be at the top of that conference, surely, no matter what happens. And he's got a nice foundation to improve upon as we go forward.
Yeah, and also just one last thing about Keith that I'm looking forward to seeing his growth this year. when you think about last year, the last 2 years, he came in, wasn't sure if he was the number one or the number two. Maybe he'll play once every 3 or 4 games, whatever the case may be. But this year, he's well aware it's his team. So we'll see when ECAC hockey play comes around if he can really just not even just put a stranglehold on his starting job, but really show the Detroit Red Wings and everyone else that he was worthy of that draft position.
That's exactly right, and I expect he takes a step forward here in the coming weeks as well.
Yeah, Greg, is there anything else you want to discuss? I think we hit on everything that was talking about these two teams, from the chip on the shoulder to what Quinnipiac really needs to work on to get to that midseason form that we've all kind of been waiting for. Is there anything else that you think we need to discuss that's important?
Nothing too much. I think they shouldn't be hitting the panic button. That's for sure. They played a good Arizona State team over the weekend. Maybe a lot of people expected Arizona State to take a step back. I expected them to start a little bit slow here, and I also didn't expect them to sweep Quinnipiac. So a lot of things happened early in the season. Nice schedule lining up for Quinnipiac going forward here. They've got Harvard on it. They've got Cornell on it this month. But other than that, should be some winnable games, and they should be in a good position.
Yeah, it'll be telling for Quinnipiac for sure. But Greg, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It means a lot coming from you, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you. Anytime you need, and I always appreciate the content that you guys put out too.